Hey guys, VaulSC here. Hope that your week has been going well. Today I am going to talk about some army lists, specifically the army lists that were used by the people who were the most successful in the recent Infinity Tabletop Simulator League. That is the top 10 finishers, people that came 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, and we'll see how they built their lists, and we'll go through them because they did provide their army codes. I took the time to talk to each and every single one of them and make sure that they're okay with me talking about their lists publicly. I felt like that might be the thing to do, just since there could be a few sensitive souls out there who don't really want that sort of scrutiny or don't really want, future tournament opponents seeing stuff or whatever it may be. But everybody's fine with it. Everybody's given me that approval. So we'll go from at 1 down to 10 and have a bit of fun. We'll talk about their army lists. A couple of people, unfortunately, I couldn't load their army code, but that's all right. We'll go through what we've got. And obviously, when you're the kind of person that gets talked about on somebody else's YouTube video, naturally you want to respond. So let's look out for their comments on the YouTube channel for those players who hopefully I don't get anybody wrong or insult anybody or misunderstand what's in your list, or if I didn't have your army code, you can always post it in the video comments and we can go from there. But let's just enjoy ourselves, have some light-hearted entertainment here and talk about the lists. Starting with Killer Whales, the champ, the player who won the whole thing. Let's start there, shall we? And to do that, I've actually got the list which he pretty much played for the entire event, and the one that was in the tournament-winning finals game, and that is the Hacktow list. He didn't actually call his list Killer Whales 1, I've just labeled it because it came through to me with no list name. We'll be commenting on the list names as well because that's also fun. But here it is. It's a Hacktow list, and it's a by-the-book Yuching list as far as I'm concerned. One comment that I want to make right off the bat is that I think most of the people who are in this kind of league are in there because they're in my Discord and they watch my YouTube channel, and they're generally sort of followers of what I put out in terms of my content. If there are people out there who just totally don't like me and disagree with me, I think it's less likely that those people would be in the league in the Discord. Therefore, I'm likely to find army lists which are similar to the kinds of lists that I play and talk about all the time. That's not for me to say that like everybody's copied me or that I'm super influential or that my lists are the best. I've just noticed a bit of a correlation between my style and the kind of army lists that the better players of this league are posting. Which is just, I think, a product of the fact that, the league is generally run by me. Having said that, the really exciting thing is that we will look at some lists which are quite different from what I normally do, or at least have some things which are a bit eyebrow-raising, and will be quite exciting to commentate on because there's stuff that I can learn from as well, the stuff that I can do better and understand as a result of seeing how you guys do it. I realize that I'm like that guy who sort of talks down to people and says, hey, look, my list is good, your list is not good. I mean, I do that all the time, and that's just what I've been doing on YouTube, so sorry about that. But for once, we can say, hey, look, maybe VaulSC doesn't have everything right. Some of these lists are actually better than my way of doing it, and we'll talk about that. With this one, though, with Killer Whales, it's pretty much the kind of list that I run myself. I can't see anything in here that I'm like, no, I'd rather swap that out for this. Honestly, the Zensha, I mean, I kind of prefer the Guilang Forward Observer. That's just my style, but there's nothing wrong with the Zensha Forward Observer, and I do, in fact, run him in lists. Everything else is just straight up, money here. He doesn't have a doctor as far as I can see. I think you're banking a lot on the Hacktow not going down. I mean, you're planning on using him more in the active turn. Yeah. And Ji Shuang, I don't always take him. In fact, I don't take him very often. The Mad Traps are really, really good, and it helps you for defense. It makes it less likely you're going to have unconscious models littered over your deployment zone. But if there's anything that I would do differently from a personal preference standpoint is maybe get a doctor in there in place of Ji Shuang and upgrade something else. Sometimes I prefer to, instead of having a Tiger Soldier, just spend the orders on the Liberto and the Zenshar and do the attacking that way and not have the Tiger off the table, so that could be swapped out for a Doctor. But it's not like there's something bad about the Tiger. I mean, everything here is just by the book, solid standard Yu-Ching, and, you know, I wouldn't expect anything less from a champion. So, good job, Killer Whales. His other list, I don't believe he used as often, and there's just more stuff in there which is a bit more niche, a little bit more situational, but it's still a really robust and solid list. You've got Lei Gong in there. I tried him out once. I liked him. I think there's slightly more optimal things in Yu-Ching, but the thing is you've got that in this other list, so if you see you really got an opportunity to use him, you have that secondary list which is a bit more experimental, a little bit more out there. Similar thing can be said of the Dao Fei. I really like the Dao Fei. I run him. I've got a lot of reasons for running him. He's just not as tried and true and solid as a Hack Tao HMG. But there are going to be some matchups and tables and missions where you'd rather have the Dao Fei there to reach for. So that's pretty cool, and this list does actually have a Doctor, despite the Dao Fei being really far away from it and Lei Gong really wanting to run out into the midfield and having NWI anyway. So that's a bit interesting. The Lu Xing, Specialist Operator of Multi-Rifle, that's my favorite profile. Love that one. And just the one Shaolin there. I don't think I'm really seeing any MSV2, but you still kind of want the Shaolin there anyway. Look, it's just solid, and you can sort of see why he's using this list more often. It's a 6 SWC 300-point list with everything you could ever want. And in this list, it's a bit more experimental, a little bit more flimsy, and it's just prone to being outclassed. But still, I mean, Yu-Ching's just in such a good place at the moment. It's so strong. All of the expansions recently have been giving them buffs, and they still have access to those super efficient units, the Guangxis, the Celestial Guard, obviously the Dao Ying. It's just so solid. There's nothing else you can really say about it. So, yep, good job, Killer Whales. Also expecting some strong lists next season. Second place we had Methuselah Adam playing Vanilla Aleph. Now, this is really exciting because I'm seeing a couple of things in Adam's list which I don't do myself when I play Vanilla Aleph, and I'm a big fan of Vanilla Aleph. I think they're very strong. I enjoy playing them, but there are a couple of points of differences between his style and my style, which I wanted to highlight. I find it really cool that he's got one of the net rods in Group 1 and two of them in Group 2. Net rods are deployable equipment, so they can't be moved between groups, and if that Group 1 net rod scatters off at the start of the game, you're missing a slot. You're starting the turn with one guy down. If your opponent spends a command token to strip that group of orders, then Naga and the Darts Dakini can't have that really long Alpha Strike push. But there's so many orders in Group 2 that you can really seriously do a lot of work regardless. So it's not that bad to sort of hedge your bets a little bit and spread things around. And if your opponent does, dot Group 1's orders, Group 2 has got things that can really attack in a robust way. The Krakot Renegade, the Fort Observer Proxy. The other thing that I'd like to point out is that the Aleph players in this league generally differ from me in the sense that all of my Aleph and OSS lists always have the Proxy Mark II Sniper and use all the SWCs, whereas all of these guys prefer the Assault Hacker. I run the Assault Hacker sometimes, but it's a bit more mission dependent. These guys all prefer that 10-point midfielder. The 21-point midfielder, I should say, not 10 points. That's the Mark V, I should say. But they all like him. Look, the Mark II Hacker is just a phenomenal piece. It's fantastic, and wherever you could take it, you'd want to. The only reason I don't run it is that I just think that the sniper is slightly better for your points, for your investment there, and you kind of need it. That's just my view, but it's not like it's some sort of massive mistake to take the Assault Hacker. Far from it. In fact, if you're feeling confident in your game against like spammy horde lists which don't really have much stuff to hack, and in fact you may feel that way with all of the other stuff to sort of fend them off, then the Assault Hacker is really going to help you against lists which are a bit more heavy on the heavy infantry and tags and the remotes and things like that for shutting that kind of thing down, and it's an amazing specialist as well for Whip 15. So I'm not going to criticize that. I'm not going to come along and say, hey guys, you're all doing it wrong, you need to run the sniper. It's just not the case. The assault hacker is really cool, and I'd like to use them a bit more in future. I'm just addicted to that beautiful, beautiful BS13 TO camo sniper with, you know, NWI. So that's just me. But the rest of the stuff is pretty similar to what I run. I mean, you've got the rebots, you've got the probots somewhere in there. Does he have the pro? Yeah, he does. Double Naga, really solid. I mean, Mine Layer Fort Observer, that's just by the book. Aleph, really. Dart with the EM grenades, I think she's really strong. I haven't found a lot of cause to take her. If this was my list, I would probably be running, as I said, I'd probably be running the Dazu instead of Dart and the Sniper instead of the Hacker. But look, that's just my style. Again, the Proxy Mark 1 Engineer, I prefer to run the Sophatect instead of the Proxy Mark 1 Engineer and have that as a hacker and then remove the Danavis, but these guys like the Danavis. The Danavis is pretty special because you've got Maestro there in addition to the hacking program, and it's a hacking device plus, so you can have white noise. So these guys have access to white noise where I wouldn't. This is Adam's list. I think he's from the United States. Can't 100% remember. But another thing to bear in mind is people have different metas. Overseas, you might be encountering people who use a lot of like TO camo aero troops, or maybe they use MSV2 aero pieces. So if that's the case, the white noise might seem like a better idea on paper. Love the Garuda Spitfire. Haven't gotten around to playing them very much, but again, just really, really solid. You've got so many units that can just punch up the field a little bit, create a repeater for assisted fire. So I really like this list. Let's have a look at his other one. So again, really, really cool because he's got Achilles in there, but he's got Achilles in a 16 order list, basically. So the Liberto, obviously, you can convert as irregular into a regular. But any list that has Achilles in it and, you know, 2 decent, robust order pools is great in my books. As you can see, he's put the chain of command in there, so one really brutal thing you could do with this guy is you've got counterintelligence, you've got the lieutenant option. Even if you strip the 2 orders away from group 1, Achilles has still got 10 orders to spend on him turn 1. So if you see that gap in your opponent's deployment zone, you see that opening, you just go and crush them. But if you don't see that opportunity, you hang back, you slow the game down, you soften them up with your 16 order list. And then turn 2 or 3, that's when he goes for the gap, goes for the opening, and at that point in the time, you should have 11 orders on him. Again, 1 net rod group 1, 2 in group 2. I kind of like that little split. I still prefer my 3 net rods in group 2. That's just my way of playing, but got to give him credit for playing it that way. But I'm not really seeing any weaknesses. There's the Mark II Hacker. We just talked about that guy. There's nothing really wrong with him. I think it's cool to see the Thorakites Forward Observer. I don't play this guy myself. I prefer to try and wedge in sort of either something a little bit more expensive or something a bit cheaper. But for a chain rifle that just sits into your deployment zone with 360 visor, can be really good for defense. You never want to trade something with this guy because he's so cheap. Sometimes he just tanks it because he's armor 3 and he still keeps going. And he's a Forward Observer, so it makes a really good liaison officer for that one as well. So I can't argue with that. I mean, medium infantry also puts you out another 4 inches outside your deployment zone. So really solid. I mean, I've never run him myself in Aleph, but you can see why it's a good choice for your list. It's not like it's much worse than a lot of other comparable options, and for some other comparable options, it's better. So, great list, and you can see why this guy basically went 4 wins and 1 draw. Hopefully, we'll be putting him up against Killer Whales first round of the next event. Okay, so we had a few Aleph players at the top. Obviously, the next one's a sectorial low, so this is Stoneman 95. Let's see what he was up to. So, list 1, he's called OSS with Camo. We're seeing the big Dakini Link with no Diva. You guys know that I like to run a Diva, but not essential. The Diva is costly and you may not need it. The Dakinis are extremely strong. He is running the Apsara Jumper Level Z. I love that. Means that you don't necessarily have to invest in a regular hacker to put assisted fire on them if you don't feel they need it. I like assisted fire for shock, but if you're feeling you're just going to be crushing them under the weight of firepower anyway, you may not need it, and that BS-13 is going to be on them all the time there, which basically frees your hackers up. You've got, again, the Assault Hacker. It's just a great unit. Boarding Shotgun midfield as well is amazing, so if you can get away with not having the Sniper, great. I will make the very small nitpicking criticism that you're only using 3.5 SWCs in this list, so in some of the big tables you may feel a bit undergunned. If you get unlucky with your Dakinis, they get picked off. Let's imagine somebody just lobs a Specfire grenade over them and just keeps blowing them up, and you've lost that little group there. You're kind of undergunned elsewhere in the list if it's an open table with not a lot there. It's kind of hard to get up the field and beat, some missile launcher on a link team or something like that. So that's one very small criticism. But generally, Stoneman was kicking ass. He was crushing a lot of people this event. And you can sort of see why. He had a list that can lay out a lot of punishment. Naga in the midfield with the Mine Layer and the Killer Hacking Device, and obviously the Mark II Assault Hacker. So pretty strong, pretty strong. He has another list that's called How Dare You? How Dare You? He's got a Marut and the full Dakini Link team with the CSU backing them up. Again, multi-sniper HMG, great combination. And yet he's still able to afford the Apsara to buff them with that. I like that because you've got the tag to allow you remotes, but he's taken a hacker anyway. Of course, it doesn't need to be a regular hacker with the Jumper Level Z, but he's got the Assault Hacker in there again. A Proxy 1 Engineer to revive the Marut. Marut's really good with the remote presence for that. Single net rod in there. I mean, I guess you have to if you want to be able to afford everything else. I always hate it when the net rod scatters off and dies and you're trying to take turn 1 with a 10 order list, but you've got the Lieutenant Strategos order in there. You've got Strategos level 3. You should be able to put in a pretty punchy Alpha Strike anyway. And unlike the previous list, this one does use the 6 SWCs, gets to 300 points. So it's pretty strong. I've been fishing around for a bit of a OSS Marut list, and I might copy it, to be honest. This is something I can learn from, in fact. I've been wondering how to play the Marut in OSS, and this guy's giving us a good example of how to do that, and thank you. I think this is a great one. Back to Aleph, vanilla Aleph, we come to Dementor from Latvia. Oh, hang on, he's messaged me. When I read his email, one of the army codes wasn't working, so I emailed him back to say, hey, can you resend that one? And he sent me the first one that I already had, so let's just check Discord, see if he's got it. Let me just see if I can copy them. I think it's this one. So if we're looking at OSS with camo, if I load up another instance of Army 6 and we copy this in, let's just check if it's a different list this time. This one is Nordic Masters List 1. Fantastic. Okay. So he's got Nordic Masters List 2. May as well deal with this first. This is Patroclus. I played this in a game not too long ago against our buddy Trying Out Combined Army. You guys might remember that bat rep. Didn't quite win it. Patroclus, though, I'm starting to like him more and more because we're in a sort of a meta now where the Liberto is just super common. We've also got O12 now, which has a lot of mad traps. You're seeing more mad traps in Yu Ching now. We're still seeing just as many crazy koalas with nomads. And we're seeing a lot of bogged down defensive deployment zones and midfields, and Patroclus allows you to move in and detonate a lot of things with your Hollow Echoes and then punch through their lines and start shooting them with that Spitfire. I absolutely love that. I find it curious that he's taken both Patroclus and Hippolyta when they both fill a similar kind of midfield aggressive role, but I do appreciate that Hippolyta has a different kind of mobility. She can jump up into buildings and things where Patroclus can't. Patroclus obviously can detonate the things out there. If anything, I might have preferred to see Hippolyta in a different group, just so you can have a turn where Patroclus moves up, softens them up, detonates the mines and crazy koalas and that. And then in the other group, Hippolyta's already got some advancement with Impetuous and then follows up from there. This is also a list, again, which only has 4.5 SWC, so with just your Spitfire and Breaker Rifle, obviously they're great in close combat, they've got good equipment, good ballistic skill, but if you don't quite cross the gap and there's a bit of a trench and they've got some long-range stuff you can't get to, well, where's the Dakini TACbot with HMG? You know, where's the long-range guns that are going to deal with that? So if you're worried about some factions, like maybe Varuna with that multi-sniper and the Link team, maybe don't run this particular list, maybe run the other one. I can see some heavy hitters like Kendrat in there in the Proxy Mark IV heavy rocket launcher, but they're not really long-range active turn pieces which can really beat something that's in a Link team or has ODD or TO camo. So I kind of worry about that for this list, so I'd be careful, but all of the individual lists in this, the options in this list are solid. I mean, if you go through it line by line, Patroclus, is he good? Yep. Hippolyta, is that good? Yep. Flashball Spot? Yep. Dart? Yep, of course. Diva Lieutenant, fantastic. Kendrat? Yep. Garuda. So if you look at everything individually, you've cherry-picked some fantastic options for Aleph, but altogether, I just don't know what his game plan was there with this one. I'm sure he's got some reasons, and we might hear his comments. The other list is an Achilles list, also doing what I do and put in the Myrmidon chain rifle. Love that guy. Sylar, if I have to take her, I definitely will over a lot of other options. I think within vanilla Aleph, you've got so many great choices in this faction that you probably don't reach for Sylar given the other alternatives, but she's still really good. I'd be reaching for stuff like the Krakots myself. So same thing here as our other Aleph friend Adam. He's got the Shukrik Chain of Command to back up Achilles, and then obviously the proxies in there. So again, the Mark II Assault Hacker, everybody loved that guy. Heavy rocket launcher, this is the first time we're seeing that. This is one of my pet picks for Aleph, is the heavy rocket launcher guy. He's a great bullet bag, great road block for a lot of people. Finally, we see a Sophatect as well. Double Yudwat's pretty cool. And then there's the Krakot Renegade. I don't like the 2 chain rifles guy, but I always find myself eating my words when somebody else fields them and rolls up the +3 fizz on Metacam, because with +3 fizz and grenades, he starts to become pretty scary. But with the double chain rifles, I feel like the chest mine's already achieving that for you, and this profile is the only one that doesn't have that, so you miss out on the ultra powerful burst potential in close combat with the chest mines. So I'm not a huge fan of this profile, but again, if you roll up that +3 fizz, he can be insane. Also missing 3 points for some reason. Can't you afford a war core with that? Am I in the right faction for this? Sometimes the list doesn't come through very well, but yeah, it's still giving me a legal list here, which means there's not already a war core in there, so maybe that's just a forgotten thing. I don't know. For those of you who are playing against him, I don't know if you saw him running an additional 3 points there. Maybe he was just going easy on us. Figured he'd just win a lot of games with this, so just made it 3 points cheaper. Cool. Well, that was Dementor. Let's move over to our friend Whyrocknodie. He didn't submit an army code, but he did email me with PDFs of his list, so we'll talk about those. There was a game that I put on YouTube between Whyrocknodie and ERS, E-R-S. It was Ariadne versus Combined Army. So that's available on YouTube. It was Game 5. Whyrocknodie defeated him quite handily, which is why he comes in 5th. I did say something in that bat rep to the tune of Whyrocknodie's getting lucky all the time, even though he's not playing well. That was a joke. I shouldn't have said that. My apologies. He's obviously a very good player, and that was not a fair thing to say. Whyrocknodie has come 5th in this event for a reason. He and I really helped build a lot of momentum with the Discord back in late 2018. At that time, I was winning all of my games against him, but more recently, the last 3 games I played against him, he's defeated me. So he's become very strong and knows the rules very well. And when I watched the game between him and Urs, even though I felt like he got lucky in places, that happens. And if I saw them rematch again, my money would definitely be on Whyrocknodie. Let's have a look at his list building ability though, because he mentioned to me that one of them was kind of a less serious list and the other one was quite a serious list. In fact, let's start with this one because this was the more serious list and was the one that we saw in the bat rep against Urs. Let's go through it. Desperado, double assault pistols. I do feel like that's the better choice. He's a great skirmisher to have in the midfield or in your deployment zone. Really good at just dispensing the smoke grenades, obviously, for free, even though you're not really running any MSV2. It helps cover your approach, get into the midfield, close the distance to get into range with your shorter range stuff. The double assault pistols means that you can get into these clutch situations where you just scream around the corner on the bike. They feel like if they don't dodge, well, you're just going to chain rifle them and trade your unit. But if they do dodge, well, you've got 5 dice in your assault pistols. So even if you're up against ODD or TO camo, you've just got a much better chance of just chipping in with a crit or just overpowering them over a couple of orders. So this guy's quite dangerous, but also super cheap. You can afford to lose him. The Chasseur, 1 in each group. Chasseur, probably one of the best things in Ariadna because of that combo of Camo State and 6th Sense Level 1 and the ability to be a mine layer and having the flamethrower. Extremely strong, so you'd never leave home without them. We're seeing cherry-picked a lot of this stuff. I mean, this is a player that understands Infinity, understands the faction. So we've got Foxtrot, Fort Observer, solid. Volunteer, a cheerleader, solid. Crackot, Renegade. Even though there are a lot of other things in Ariadna that do similar things, the guy's just such an optimal, well-optimized profile that you kind of want to take him anyway. Love the Grunt for inferior infiltration. Probably don't want to take too many of them. And in vanilla Ariadna, I think the availability is a bit lower than, say, US Ariadna. But what you do is you just infiltrate him next to the enemy somewhere annoying and try and toast them. And if he fails the roll, he's back at the deployment zone. But Ariadna tend to have good Fizz, so Fizz 11 gives you a better chance of sticking it. Kazakh Doctor, mainly there to help the Spetsnaz, I'm thinking. Liberto, because you always take one. Line Kazakh Lieutenant. That's good that he's got another line Kazakh, so a very common tactic for Ariadna players, just sort of have 2 of each of these cheerleaders so that you can't spot the lieutenant as easily. Let's talk about the Paracommando, though, because this is one choice you don't see Ariadna players playing all the time. So when I analyze a list like this, I'm thinking that there's a lot of obligatory stuff that you've generally got to take if you want to win, but you have some room to be creative, and you have some room to sort of swap a few things out where it's a bit ambiguous as to whether this is the best or not. And secondarily, you want to put some things in your list which aren't that usual because you want to be able to surprise your opponent sometimes. The Paracommando for me is one of those things. Usually with Ariadna, you're trying to grapple with them in terms of position. You're trying to watch so many different angles. You have to wait for Van Zandt to show up. And sometimes people really just aren't expecting that Paracommando to show up. And when he does, he's just a humble BS-12 mimetism guy with an HMG and the active turn. And he can so easily overpower a lot of units. He can also outposition some units that would normally outclass him. So if you're going up against, your Asura or whatever it is, or some really super elite unit, but you get them from behind or you get them at the wrong range band, this guy's still going to crush him. And hey, if he does go down, you could doctor him potentially. You could just leave him and attack with something else because he's not like 1 billion points. He's just 31 points. Love the Armor 2 snuck in there for a drop trooper as well. Means that he might tank the occasional hit. So I like him. I think he's a great choice, and he did pretty well in that game that we watched. Van Zandt sometimes doesn't provide the most value if your opponent's very good and sees him coming and plays perfectly, but most games don't work out that way. You're almost always able to find some really good opening for him, so he's one of the better things about Ariadna. Highlander, obviously good. Spetsnaz, one of the the go-to staple things in the faction. Tractor mules, of course, buffing out the orders, so really nothing to complain about. Oh, there's the second grunt as well. Cool, so you got 2 of them. But look, it's hard for me to think of what I'd swap out. Sometimes you'd like to have a dog soldier or the Antipodes team, just bits and pieces like that. But that's when you swap out the Paracommando and you have them instead. It's not like you're swapping out much of the other stuff. You're typically going to have a Spetsnaz HMG. You're typically going to have the the Chasseurs there. The things which are potentially movable, the Desperado, the Van Zandt, Paracommando, but everything else is generally going to be in there for Ariadna. Taking a quick look at his obviously less serious list, he's got the T2 Rifle Wolver, Blackjack T2 Sniper, the Ratnik, Veteran Kazakh in Vanilla Ariadne without the Link Team, Uxie McNeil. He's only got 8 maximum orders in each group. You know, it's kind of fun. I mean, if you find yourself, I mean, remember, these lists, people came up with them before we even saw what the league was going to be like. We didn't know how many people were going to sign up. We didn't know how serious it was going to be. If from a perspective of if you're going to encounter like really new players or people who've got no idea what they're doing, it's sometimes fun to play a list which is a bit quirkier. Also, even against a good player and a serious player, sometimes you can throw people off a bit by putting them in situations where they're not used to facing these models. They're expecting the Spetsnaz and the Kazakh and Van Zandt, and suddenly they're having to deal with the T2 Sniper Blackjack and the Ratniks running at them, and they haven't been in that situation before. And sometimes this can be a fun way to go. But yeah, I mean, if you played a list like this for several tournaments in a row, over and over and over again, you'd start to feel the lack of the chasseurs and the lack of the Liberto and just bits and pieces like that. So yeah, that's all that can really be said on that one. Okay, so that was Whyrocknodie. Then we have the other 2 Ariadne players in terms of the TAC people. So let's go and have a look. We're coming to, I think it's Cthulhu, who came 6th with Bow Wow, the TAC thing. Here we are. Bow Wow TAC. Alrighty. Again, we're seeing 8 overall troopers in Group 1 and 8 in Group 2. And for those of you who've been following me for years and years and years, you'll see that I never do that. I always have 10 in Group 1 and the rest in the next group. Just because I do it doesn't mean that it's optimal. Sometimes it can be okay to split your groups out like that, so long as you know what you're doing. Just to be clear, the reason why I have a Group 1 with 10 orders in it is because that's the group that's going to contain the units that are aggressive, that are order hungry, that have the most long-range potential for a whole turn worth of Ramboing. I like that because even though in a lot of games I will not see an opportunity to go on a long run with one unit, and I'll be spending a few orders on this guy, a few orders on this guy, and a few orders on this guy, sometimes, due to luck, due to the table layout, due to a mistake of my opponent, there'll be an opportunity for me to make a massive push into their territory with all of the orders on one unit or one link team and get something done that I just absolutely couldn't have if I didn't have those extra 2 orders. So to always give myself that opportunity, that's why I build my lists that way. Some people, as you can see here, do it split 8 and 8. And look, that's okay, because these are probably players that are planning on playing a full, 3-round game where they're spreading it over 3 turns as they should. They've got a long-term game plan. They like flexibility. They're planning on chipping away at their opponent by spending a few orders at a time on different things, and they aren't going to be so much committing straight away. Secondarily, these are players who have probably calculated that it's okay for them to spend a couple of command tokens at the start of the game to shift. So let's say your opponent does decide to... Actually, no, I need to question that. I might not have got the rules right on that one. Can you move models between groups after your opponent has docked them with the command token? Maybe my misunderstanding here is that perhaps you're allowed to do it after they've spent the command token, and perhaps the strategy here is to wait for them to remove 2 orders from one of the groups and then move a couple of orders from that group to the other group and top it up so you've got 10 orders to attack no matter what. That'd be pretty cool. I'm not too sure if it works that way, but looking at this, you've got a dog warrior in each group, so that kind of checks out, plus the antipodes here. So this list is capable of a lot of aggression. Also, if you get to game round 2, for example, you'd be able to do it regardless, where you swap everything over and you have that big push into their line. And another thing is that dog warriors don't necessarily need to make a 10-order push. Usually they're pushing an enemy territory, they take a few hits, they go down, they do a really good trade, they inflict some damage, but you wouldn't have needed 10 orders for it. So there is that. Everything else there seeming okay. I don't know about the Line Kazakh missile launcher. These guys are only armor 1, ballistic skill 11. surely if you're going to take that kind of heavy weapon in this team, maybe the Frontovic or Veteran Kazakh ought to have the guns. I know you've already got the AP Sniper and AP HMG, but I feel like this gun here might be better served somewhere else in the faction. Just handing over the heavy weapons to something that could actually use it a bit more, since you've already got the heavy weapons in the team. Then we've got a list called Spam Tartary. This time he does have the 10 models group 1, the full Kazakh link team here, the veteran, all the line Kazakhs, heaps of them actually. Urmandino, Strelok, really liking that. He's got the Courier, TM Courier, with the Katyusha. Don't see those all the time. Vasily with the T2 Sniper, so really strong ARO piece. And this seems to be a little bit more like my kind of list. It seems to be a bit more robust, shall we say, but I'm not seeing the Dog Soldiers and I'm not seeing the Antipodes in this list at all, so it seems a bit more defensive actually. So if you have to take first turn with this list, what do you really attack with? Do you try and push in there with a Strelox, who can be a bit squishy? I'm not sure. Do you pick up with the whole link team and move them out turn 1? I don't know. So for that reason, I'd be thinking maybe there's something you can prune out of this, and have one of the Dog Soldiers in this list is something I'd make me a bit more comfortable with it. Either the Dog Soldier or the Antipodes, or anything that can really spend a lot of orders doing a lot of attacking. Okay, so we have the next, the other finalist. It's Dev, who was in the finals, lost to Killer Whales. Let's see how he did. Here's a list called Frostbite Firefight. Was this the list that he played in the finals? I don't think it was, because he's got a Dog Warrior in there. We didn't see a Dog Warrior in that list. He's got the Scout Lieutenant instead of the Line Kazakh Lieutenant, and in his finals list he did have the Line Kazakh Lieutenant. Looking through the link team, totally solid. There's no specialist in the link team though, but you don't really need it in Frostbite Firefight, so that makes sense. Pavel McManus, we saw him in the finals, quite an impressive trooper. Assault Pack and Dog Warrior, nothing really to scoff at there. Secondary, this guy really loves his Assault Packs, by the way. He's got Assault Packs, you know, ×2 in each list, so obviously a big fan of them. Probably goes well for him in his meta. Going over to his other list, he's called it SuSeEQ, maybe that's something in Latvian, I'm not sure. But this is indeed the list he played in the finals. It was a pretty strong list. Couldn't contend so much with all of the Yuching defense by the end of the game. He has only spent 4.5 SWCs, so there could have been an extra gun in there. I was talking to a friend about this after the finals, and we both felt like the double assault packs may be a little bit much. If you were to remove one of them and put in something with a bigger gun, you can do a bit more shooting, but again, it's just kind of hard to root out a Yuching player who's just hiding everything. So maybe the assault pack is the way to go, and this guy perhaps knows a bit more about tac compared to us laymen who just play Armchair Infinity. But look, we saw how this list went. He put up a good fight. You know, it was actually a reasonably close game. He played it well. So it's hard for me to say whether the list itself is optimal, but I can say that it's more about the person commanding list. All right, we're getting into something else now apart from OSS and TAC. Finally, this is 8th place. It's Lobo playing Shazvasti. Now, Lobo played a ton of games in the league, mostly in the unscheduled, but he did do well in the scheduled league. The first list is, you know, pretty fearsome. It's not the kind of Shazvasti list that I usually play, but look, let's face it, it's a very strong list, and maybe there's some tips that I can take here, so maybe I should pay attention. I've sometimes criticized people for taking all the Tiger creatures in Group 2. I like to put a couple of regular orders in there just because sometimes you have a Tiger creature that's in such a good position that you really want it to have a couple more orders, and you may not be willing to spend your command tokens to do that. You also have some situations where you really have a Tiger in a great position, but you don't want it to impetuous. You want it to be held in place, and then you want to spend your irregular order to carefully move into position to berserk somebody. So that's why I like to have a couple of regulars in Group 2, personally. But the advantage of having a big spam horde of them in Group 2 is that they have this defensive screen throughout the midfield in your deployment zone, and because Shazvasti's weakness is they're quite squishy and vulnerable once they do start getting pounded on, is the Tiger screen absorbs that damage and prevents enemies from getting up to you. Secondarily, they're great at controlling the midfield with intuitive attacks and it discovers and just berserks onto midfield, expensive specialists. So they can be really brutal in that regard. So definitely understanding of that. Nocta for Group 1, I think that's okay. I mean, if you're going first and you need every single order, you just put him in camo state, mark state on the board, but if you're going second, he can still use hidden deployment effectively. Or if you're not planning on spending that many orders on turn 1, you can always just keep him in hidden deployment Group 1. Turn 1, Shishkin, Lieutenant Red Fury, stock standard, Guilo, Missile Launcher, Harris. I've run that, I've liked it, it's very, very good. Victor Mesa, I've never used. Victor Mesa's the slightly questionable thing. I prefer the M drone, but look, I think Lobo probably has the view that white noise is very valuable sometimes. Having a very good specialist in there is very valuable. And sometimes Victor Mesa may be wanting to shoot with his boarding shotgun or make use of his double nanopulse from the Link team alongside Shishkin. Honestly, if Shishkin's shooting point blank with the Red Fury, usually she's going to get the job done. But if you've got a boarding shotgun in there as well, one thing Shishkin can't do as well is use the impact blast from the boarding shotgun. So in some sense, it checks out. It's not my style, but I can certainly agree with it and respect it. Caliban Chain of Command, fantastic, 100% recommend. Great for obviously backing Shishkin up. Dr. Worm Slave, Drone, Icadrons, Drone, all bog standard. Shrouded Hacker, nothing to argue with there. So just a really solid, well-rounded Shaz list in my view. He did tell me that he didn't really use the Sphinx list. Fair enough. I mean, it's hard to find an optimal opportunity to use a Sphinx list, especially when you've got such a powerful Shishkin list there to run. But let's have a look at it anyway. Shrouded Mentor, yep. Killer Hacking Shrouded, that's fine. Caliban Spitfire, yes, I love that guy. Finally somebody else playing him, he's really good. Another Caliban, so mostly midfielders. He's not actually running the Link team so much. The thing about a list like this is that it's also available pretty much to vanilla. So it's the kind of list you can run in vanilla anyway. And vanilla can obviously put in a few things that this setup can't, so you're not really making the most use of the sectorial when you play this. It's still really strong though. I mean, anything with a Sphinx and a bunch of camo markers is going to be able to win some games. Unfortunate that we're only 3.5 SWCs, but to be honest with you, I mean, some of the stuff in here hits so hard it may as well, cost SWCs, if you know what I'm saying. It's sometimes surprising to me that with all the Sphinx can do, that it only is 2 SWCs, in terms of the cost. Okay, we come to Hockeyman, who came 9th. He also said to me that he had 2 lists, but only played one of them. He said to me the one he didn't play was the one that had guided, and I assume that he's talking about the one with the Vertigo Zon Smart Missile Launcher. So, looking at this one, I think the plan here was to have the Feuerbach pitcher in the Link team, fire the pitcher, use Jazz and Billy to spotlight something, and then blast it with all of the orders in Group 2 from the Vertigo, which kind of checks out. You've got tons of Jaguars here for defense, Intruder, multi-sniper, so nice defensive list. But sometimes the Vertigo runs out of steam, they keep dodging, you may miss some shots, you might be up against stuff like U-turn hacking program, and what this list is kind of lacking is a lot of really aggressive, proactive stuff to get up in their face and get damage done. This list doesn't really have that, which is why he's probably played this one more with McMurray in it, and I can't blame him. It's funny how he's called his list Oculus Dei and Dei Melius. It's like a religious hymn, Oculus Dei, Dei Melius. So Oculus Dei has the Cyclone Feuerback pitcher, fantastic. Love the Cyclone for Corregidor because it can be linked. I personally enjoy the Spitfire, but nothing to scoff at there with the Feuerback. Probably a much more powerful ARO piece than the Spitfire is. But if you're charging up in that grill, the Feuerback's the way to go. He is playing it as a defensive link team, because normally you'd see some heavy weapons in there for the Alguacils, or maybe a Mobile Brigada, but we haven't really seen that in this. He's relying on McMurray to do the hard work. So this is purely a defensive link team, less so for uprooting and charging at the enemy's face. Jazz and Billy, just too good not to take with how cheap Billy is. It's just outrageous they've been given this trooper. McMurray, obviously, again, too good not to take. Just one of the top 5 things in the game at the moment. I like the fact that the Senior Massacre Group 2 can be linked with the 4 Jaguars, so if it's your active turn and you're not actually going to be shooting anything with this order battery over here, you switch the link team over to Jaguar and the Senior Massacre. They can charge out there, and most players are going to be spending the the command token to strip 2 orders off Group 1, because they see McMurray in the group. And once they've done that, well, you can swap this over to Senior Massacre, charge up the field with the Jaguars, plant smoke various places, get them into close combat, and that's really dangerous play. You could really take out something important and just jam people up with Jaguars if you do that effectively, or just pop around corners with your BSG, chain rifles, and just cause a hell of a lot of trouble. Secondarily, I mean, even if they have stripped group 1 of 2 orders there to counter McMurray, well, if you do that tactic with Group 2 first and smokes everywhere, well, guess what? After you've made that play, McMurray comes charging in, nothing can see him, he's swiping left to right with his Templar close combat weapon, or lobbing, spec fire grenades everywhere. So that's what makes this list really fearsome, really nasty. And with the smoke, of course, synergizing with the intruder, that deals with a lot of stuff long range. So I like it. I'm really happy to see this list, and I wouldn't mind trying it myself. The only strategic point of difference I tend to make is I usually like to just have a bit of a gun in this group. So that if things aren't going that well, you have that backup option of picking up and moving out and trying to gun them down turn 3 with something in that link team other than the Feuerback, right? So that's my preference. Finally, we have the 10th place player. That was Cobra Prime. Cobra Prime's comment to me was that he just cobbled it together at the last moment. But to be fair, every single person that I talked to said some version of that, probably just to save a bit of face, because they knew that I'd be mocking them on YouTube. Love you guys, by the way. You did very well. A fine achievement. I mean, if I'd been in the league for the competitive rounds, who knows? I probably would have come mid-pack. Alright, so we had a Riot Girl list. Spitfire, missile launcher, multi-rifle. These guys are armed to the teeth. I've never regarded these guys as one of the better link teams in the game, but they are still super strong. They're not really down in the dumps in terms of the rankings. These guys are really solid. The Hyperdynamics level 1 is very useful, and the Multispectral Visor level 1 also very useful, and the Sixth Sense level 2 gets around stuff like white noise and albedo. So the double missile launcher is a brute of a thing to deal with when it's your reactive turn. Zero, Fort Observer, Killer Hacker, pretty standard. The Uberfall Commando, I've been loving these guys in my foreign company games. No doubt they are also just as good as in Bakunin, obviously. That's where they're from. Lunacod, good for defense with the Crazy Koalas. Helps to stop the Rat Girls from getting outflanked, outmaneuvered. And your screen of skirmishers, Group 2, very strong as well. I think, again, what we're seeing here is it's more about the player than the list. When you see a guy like Cobra Prime coming 10th, chances are he was playing this really well rather than trying to leverage some sort of trick or tactic inherent in just the army list on paper, right? It's probably more about what he was doing with it. Group 2 looks even more impressive. He's got the moderator group, but he's also got the Kusanagi in there, I believe with a link team. So I think that he's joined them up with the Reverend Healer and Custodia, which I don't seem that very much because they seem a bit overcosted. But they probably get into some situations where you're just glad to have them. They can really outclass some enemies in the midfield. They're all medium infantry for that additional level 4 inches of deployment. Uberfall Commando, of course. Group 2 has a lot more Morlocks now, and I kind of like this because with a full 9-man group here, your opponent's usually going to be stripping Group 1 away with the 2 orders at the start because they're afraid of the Uberfall Commandos. But then the Morlocks come screaming across the battlefield, dropping smoke everywhere. Possibly the Lunicod heading over there as well and clamping some crazy koalas down, blasting them with a shotgun, which more than likely has assisted fire on it. So maybe that is what Cobra Prime was doing. It does seem pretty nasty. Bakunin definitely aren't one of the better factions in the game, but you can make them work if you plan a careful list like this, and if you play them well like Cobra Prime obviously was. Running out of breath here, just talking a mile a minute. So let me know, you guys, what did you think of their lists? Were you one of their opponents? Tell me how you went against them. If you were one of these players and I've completely misunderstood your list and just got it wrong, obviously post me a strongly worded comment berating me from my ineptitude, and let's see what you come up with for Season 2, and I hope that these guys continue to do well. But I also hope that you guys come up with some really good lists as well and give them a run for their money and challenge them for the top spots in the next time around. See you guys then.